Birkas kohanim, the bracha of the kohanim, give us is recorded in this week's parasha based on how Rashi explains the introduction to that bracha. The Rebbe will give us a beautiful insight into the power of this bracha. And it begins, B'tzivay al birkas kohanim, when the kohanim are instructed to bless the Jewish people, it says, Koisa barachas b'nei Yisrael, so shall you bless the Jewish people, Amor lahem, saying to them as follows. So Rashi explains three things. First, es ateva is Amor lahem. He quotes the phrase Amor lahem and explains that structure of the word, that construction of Amor, is kamoy zachor shamor, is the same construction as you have by Shabbos, the word zachor, the word shamor, which we'll discuss later exactly what it means. Bela is dishont, or however you pronounce it in Old French. Then he says, Amor lohem, another interpretation, lohem, to say it to them means, shikulam shayim, that they should actually hear what you're saying as the kohanim. And then he picks up Amor, that the spelling of the word Amor is mole with a vav, to teach us loisavarchim, that the kohanim should not bless the yidden bechipozin, rushing, v'beholois, and with chaos, ela bekavana, uvelev shalom, but rather with intention and a full heart. Now look what Rashi's done over here. The fact that Rashi, in all three interpretations, he quoted words out of the pasuk. Twice he quoted the full phrase and once just the word amor. Muchach indicates implies that each one of his three explanations is a different perspective and a different angle that is relevant to what he's quoting, and therefore we have to understand. Seeing as in the first two explanations that Rashi uses, the headline he includes is Pirish Gam Esteves Amor Lohem. He also explains not only the meaning of the word Amor, but clearly is interested in explaining the word Lohem as well, because he quotes it. Whereas the third explanation is only the word Amor, logic says he should have reversed the order. Rashi should have first explained the single word Amor, which is the first word that he's explaining, and why it is with a vav. And then after that, then go into the second explanation, what should have been the second and third explanation of not only Amor, but Amor plus Lohem. So why did Rashi do it in what appears to be the wrong order? The only explanation must be that each of the three explanations are independent of each other, and nevertheless, in spite of them all being independent, they have to be explained in this particular order, because what Rashi wants to address by telling us why Amor has a vav is a question that's only is a question that you'd only think of after you know the information provided in the two explanations of why it says Amor Lahem. So let's understand what Rashi wants us to know about this instruction. Let's start with the first explanation where he said Amor is the same construction as the word Kamoy Zochor Shamor. So some of the commentators point out that Rashi bidvarav, what Rashi wants to do over here is the Yashiv Koishi B'Tevas Amor. He wants to address an apparent problem with the word Amor, because it's not said in an instructive language like Emor, which would be an instruction, and it's stated in what looks like present tense, or makar, or in the infinitive. Saying. Kevan, the reason is because listen to how it's not Emor. It's not in the plural imru, they should say, an instruction, and it becomes it's amoir. So that's apparently, say the Mefarshim, that's what's bothering Rashi. It sounds like an instruction, this is how you should bless the Jewish people, but the actual language, the grammar, is not in an instruction, it's in the infinitive. And therefore, some of the commentators on Rashi say that actually what Rashi wants us to know is that it's actually not an instruction. It's a present tense version of the verb. And then they say, Rashi's telling us it's not so unusual. It's similar to Zocher and Shomer, which are in the present, and when you have something which is in the present tense, and you would have expected it to be an instruction, instead it's telling us that this is something which is an ongoing principle. Which is in fact what Rashi already said previously when he explained the word Zachor, that you should pay attention to constantly remember Shabbos even when it is not Shabbos. In other words, the comets followed by cholam version of a verb is to tell us that something should happen consistently. So that's what some of the Mefarshim say about Rashi. He wants us to know Amor Lahem is not the instruction to the kohanim to bless the Jewish people, rather to indicate that Birchas Kohanim should be ongoing. That's one explanation. There's another set of Mefarshim explained differently. That actually Amor is not a word of instruction at all, but it is what we call the infinitive term of the verb. And therefore Rashi comes to tell us, look, even when the construction is presented in the way of an infinitive, still it could imply an instruction. Look at those two words. Zocher and Shamar are in the construction that is not an instruction. It's remembering or keeping. And yet the Torah's intention is to instruct us. You must remember and you must keep Shabbos. Okay, so those are the two commentaries. But the truth is, both of those angles, and trying to explain why Rashi picks up and tells us that Amor is in that particular format like Zocher Shamar, there are many questions. Let's focus on one. Seeing as Rashi's intention, according to these Mefarshim, is just to explain why Amor is not Emor, why did he include the word Lohem in the heading? Remember, Rashi only includes in his Dibra Maschil what he plans to explain. If he's only explaining Amor, and that it is Lashon Mokor, and it's actually to tell us that it's a consistent mitzvah, or that it's Mokor and yet is an instruction, who needs the word Lohem in the Dibra Maschil? Why didn't he just say the word Amor? Another question. Why does Rashi need two examples to prove that the construction of the word Amor could either be in the ongoing sense or in the sense that in spite of it being an infinitive, it's still a message for an instruction? He could have just brought one example and it would have been sufficient, surely. So those are our questions on Rashi's first interpretation. Amor Lahem, yet you're only explaining Amor, and why do we need two examples to prove it? Let's look at the second commentary of Rashi. The second commentary Rashi proposes is that you should say it to them, implying that the kohanim have to speak in such a way that everybody hears what they're saying. So there, that would seem to be, as the Mefarshim point out, that a person shouldn't think that a kohen is allowed to say the bracha quietly to himself, in a way that the community would not hear it. So what's Rashi telling us? You have to say it loud enough that they can all hear it. Now, this really doesn't make sense, because firstly, whichever way you look at it, it seems wrong. If Rashi's goal is to tell us the word lohem is the key, the words you say have to reach them, so they have to hear. So he didn't have to then include the word amor in the Dibra Maskil, because lohem is what tells us they have to hear it. And if Rashi does in fact learn it from the word amor as well, that the way that the kohanim say the bracha has to be in such a way that it will reach the ears of the audience. Which, by the way, would probably be the more logical way to explain it, because the pasuk is addressing the kohanim, not the audience, so it must be speaking to how the kohanim should say the bracha rather than how the audience should hear it. So there's still Rashi could have used an expression which would have expressed that point. Like, for example, the way the Gemara says it, the Gemara says Birkas Kohanim has to be allowed. Why say it in such a roundabout way? In such a fashion that people could hear it. Just say it has to be allowed. Question number 2, base. According to the Meforshim, Rashi wants to preclude your thinking that a kohen can say the bracha quietly, that only the kohanim can hear it. If that was Rashi's intention, like the Meforshim suggest, why didn't he just say so? Like he's about to do in the next explanation, don't rush it. So say, don't mumble it. And exactly like the Sifri and the Gemara did. They said, Be'koil ram, say it aloud. And if you think about it, if the Sifri and the Gemara had to spell it out, surely Rashi definitely has to spell it out. Because in mind, Sifri over Gemara, Limud B'Shoben Esel Mishnah Vav Yasal Ken Ben Chamesh say the Gemara. The Sifri is directed to at least a 10-year-old, and the Gemara is directed at least to a 15-year-old. And yes, and they had to spell out to the older child that what does it mean, that they shouldn't say it quietly to themselves. Then surely Rashi, who's speaking to a 5-year-old, would have to say this clearly, without just leaving it to the imagination, say it in such a way that they can hear it. Third question on the second commentary of Rashi, why does he say everybody has to hear? Why doesn't he just say who has to hear? You'll say, but that's already in the pasuk, right? Because we're following on from the pasuk said, you're speaking to the Jews. Everybody knows that the kohanim giving the bracha don't have to be heard by the entire Jewish nation, in spite of the fact that the pasuk said Bnei Yisrael. It's whoever happens to be there in front of the kohanim when they give the bracha. So Rashi should have used a much clearer expression, similar to the expression that the Sifri uses, that all those who are gathered in that space need to hear what the kohanim say, or something like that. So to suggest that Rashi's only concerned that you might think the kohanim could mumble the brachas and that's okay, and he had to preclude that explanation, clearly not the case. So what's Rashi trying to tell us? And lastly, B'Pirush HaGimel, the last explanation of Moir Mole, where he says that Moir is written with a vav to teach us lo yisavorchem b'chipazon of beholus, that they shouldn't rush through or be chaotic in the way that they give the bracha, but they should have intention and a full heart. Also, tzarich lavin. Couple of questions we have to understand over there. 3 questions. Aleph, number 1, many times when analyzing Rashi, we've learned a principle of Rashi, which is the fact that sometimes a word is written with a vav or without a vav or any other variation of spelling is not a compelling question for the pshat understanding of a pasuk, asher Rashi mechuyev l'taret, so that Rashi has to address. V'adraba, to the contrary, beruba deruba dehateves b'chumash aksuvas molei oy chaser, the vast majority of times that a word is written in the Torah either with an additional or a missing letter, ein Rashi meir davar, Rashi says, not a word. Unless there's a specific question that relates to the understanding of the pasuk, which would then be answered by the fact that the word is spelt in a particular way, then Rashi would mention it. So if that's the case, we have to understand what about the instruction to bless the Jewish people is not clear in Pshat, that by knowing that Amoir is written with a Vav, now we'll have clarity. What's so difficult to understand? Bay is another really simple question if you think about it, an obvious question. Why would you think the kohanim would rush? Why would you think the kohanim would be chaotic in their blessings? That we have to give them a special warning. Make sure to focus. Why? But Medrash says, that Hashem tells the kohanim, don't think that because I've instructed you to give the Jewish people blessings, that don't now give a bracha as if it's a burden on you, or it's something that you got to get off your chest. The Medrash says, do it with intention, with love. Apparently what the Midrash is saying, according to the Mefarshim, is seeing as Hashem delegated the bracha for the Yidden into the hands of the kohanim, so the kohanim might be tempted for whatever reason just to get it done. That's the Midrash. But it doesn't seem that that's what Rashi intends to tell us. Because, like we said before, if Rashi wants to say something, he could say it. He could say clearly, don't rush and feel it a burden. He didn't say that. And the truth is that even though the Midrash does take that particular angle, it's not so suitable to the simplest understanding of the pasuk. Because prior to this, we've already learned that a foundational mitzvah of Judaism is to love your fellow like yourself. Obviously, every kohen wants what? That if somebody gives him a bracha, obviously the kohen would not want somebody to rush a bracha to him. He'd want the full-hearted bracha. Surely he would do the exact same thing when blessing the Jewish people. Okay, so perhaps he'll have another angle on this, but even that the Rebbe is going to debunk. Don't think that the reason you might suspect the kohanim of rushing or being tumult when they give the bracha is Shema you are kohanim nivolim v'nirashim because they'd be overwhelmed because they've been given such a massive responsibility by Hashem to bless the Jewish people. Because the kohanim are not the only people who are ever instructed by Hashem to do something. And if we're worried that somebody who's instructed directly by Hashem is going to get too tumbled from doing it, then the Torah should have preempted that the very first time we were ever given mitzvahs. Like the mitzvah of Chodesh Hazeh Lochem. Okay, Rosh Chodesh, don't get overwhelmed. Even though it's a tremendous responsibility to do what Hashem says, don't get overwhelmed. Why wait all the way to Parashas Nasso? Now say, guess what? People should not get overwhelmed and too excited about the responsibility of a bracha and mess it up, or a mitzvah and mess it up. Why does Rashi have to say there's two issues we're concerned about? Speed, that they're going to rush through it, and chaos. And where did Rashi get these two ideas from? And we can ask a similar question about the two positive instructions that Rashi believes the Torah is giving the kohanim, bekavana with intention, uveleiv shalom with a full heart. Why two? Especially when you consider that the Medrash only looked at one possibility, which was kavana. So it would appear that we haven't really understood what Rashi needs to address over here. It's not as simple as what is the format of the word Omoir, and it's like Zocher and Shomer. And it's not as simple as saying that they need to hear what you're saying. And it's not as simple as saying that they shouldn't get too tumult. There's more to it over here as well. The explanation is first, let's start right at the beginning. Why is Rashi absolutely convinced that the format of the word Amor is like the format of the words Zocher and Shomer? It's only because it says Amor with the word Lohem. That's why Rashi includes both words in his headline, because that's what leads to his explanation. Why so? If the pasuk had said, so shall you bless the Jewish people, saying, then it would be absolutely clear that the word Amor is not an instruction. Kosevaruchu is the instruction, bless the Jewish people. Amor is the infinitive, saying. And that would be fine, we wouldn't have to explain it. And we would have interpreted the pasuk, this is how you bless the Jewish people, by saying the following words. But now there's a bit of a mixing of two metaphors over here. You've got the word amor, which is the infinitive, and you've got lahem, which is the recipients. It sounds like an instruction. Like very shortly before, we were told that the Nazir may not become impure to them. That's an instruction. And many other examples. So now we have a problem. If it sounds like an instruction, why is the verb not structured like an instruction verb? Why is it amor and not emor? If it was just amor on its own at the end of the sentence, great, saying, no problems. But once you put lohem, it sounds like there's a direct instruction over here. Loshen moker v'loshen sive al pe'ula, the infinitive version of a verb, and the instructive version of a verb, harem beizin yodim nefrodim, they're completely different ideas. Ki moker shoylol inyan pe'ula, a word that is a what they call present participle in the infinitive, saying, doing, is the opposite of say, do. It's the exact opposite message. That's what's bothering Rashi. That's what Rashi wants to address. That even though the words amor lehem actually do indicate an instruction, amor becomes it could still be structured that the verb is in the form of mokar, of the infinitive. Like zocher shomer, and he has to prove it because he has examples. And later on shomer is Yom HaShabbos. It's definitely an instruction. And yet it definitely was presented not in the format of an instruction, but of an infinitive. Because, as we already noted from Rashi, the indication over here is that it's got a long-term effect. You should always be remembering Shabbos, even during the week. Similarly with amor lehem, it is expressed in the format of mokar, because the bracha of the kohanim is an ongoing mitzvah that exists right throughout the period of the whole of history, but it's an instruction. And now we understand why Rashi needs both words. Because let's say that Rashi had only said amor is like zochor. It actually wouldn't be good enough for us. Because we'd then say the bishlam elinyan zochor. Let's analyze the word zochor. You could say that putting zochor in that infinitive allows us also to interpret as an instruction. Why? Because Rashi tells us that mitzvah is actually an ongoing mitzvah. It is an ing mitzvah. It is remembering. In Rashi's words, always remember Shabbos even when it's not Shabbos. And Rashi's not saying that you have to actively do something to remember Shabbos, but that your heart should always be focused in such a way that you will always remember Shabbos. So it's a mitzvah which doesn't have a start and end date. But then you'd say, Birkas Kohanim is not like that. The instruction to say the words of Birkas Kohanim to the audience, that's actually not something which is all the time. It has certain times during the year when you say Birkas Kohanim. And even in those places in the world where you say Birkas Kohanim every day, it's still a certain time when you say it. Even if you do believe that the Torah is telling us over here you have to have Birkas Kohanim daily, it's only once a day. That's not like Zocher, which is always be conscious of Shabbos, so you can always remember Shabbos at all times, 24/7. That's why Rashi has to bring a second word, where you see Shomer is also in the same construction, and yet it's not every single moment of every single day. Because the fact that Rashi just said Zocher Shomer without telling us which Zocher and Shomer he was referring to, well, then it becomes obvious. Must be referring to a Zachar and Shomer that we're already familiar with, that we've already learned about, which is Zachar and Shomer with regard to Shabbos. And therefore we'll know this, that Shmir Shabbos ain't a pula Tamidis Vinyan Tamidi. To guard and to keep Shabbos is not something which applies 24/7. Obviously only on Shabbos. And in spite of the fact that it is not 24/7, it's still presented in Lashon Mokar, in the infinitive, with the comments, which indicates something constant or consistent. Which then teaches us now we know that it is possible for there to be an activity which is not a 24/7 activity, but if it is something which is done consistently at the same time each time, like Shabbos or like Birkas Kohanim, that consolidates Rashi's argument that the Lashon Moker works and belongs here. But on the other hand, the Zohar couldn't have only used the word Shomer and not Zohar, because that would have been a very weak argument in favor of what Rashi wants to tell us, that Amor could also be an instruction. Because to keep Shabbos has no proactive elements to it. That's the Zohar. The proactive elements are the Zohar elements, making Kiddush, etc. That's the Zohar elements. The Shomer elements are all the things to desist from. It's only things that you have to avoid. And so if you only had the word Shomer to prove that this construction of the verb works as an instruction, you'd say, yeah, what kind of an instruction? An instruction that could be always. Why? Because even though the way you desist from certain activities is only at certain times, but Yom HaShabbos dafka on Shabbos. But through the course of Shabbos, every minute of Shabbos, there are things that you're not doing. Whether you thought of doing them or not, the fact is you're not doing them. And the truth is, even during the course of the week, even when a person does these same activities during the week, they're still Shomer Shabbos. They're not breaking Shabbos. That's why the primary proof is from the word Zohar, because that's a proactive mitzvah. That you have to do something to commemorate and remember Shabbos. And obviously that's not going to be as consistent as Shomer, because Shomer is, you could do that your whole life. A person could go through their whole life without breaking Shabbos every single day of the week. And there where you have Zohar and it's constructed in a way of the infinitive, that helps us to understand how Amor could also be the same and yet represent an instruction. So let's bring this back to Amor Lahem, the instruction to give the Birkas Kohanim. We know clearly that Birkas Kohanim is not a 24/7 mitzvah. It is only at certain allocated times. Yet on the other hand, because it has a consistency, it's always at the same time, whether it be certain times of the year, or if it's every single day, but at a certain time, you could use the expression saying, which indicates that it's ongoing. Like we've seen with the expression that even though you only light the menorah at night, it's still called tamid, as if it's constant. Even though it's not lit for 24 hours. And the truth is, you could say the same for the carbon tamid, which is also not something brought throughout the day 24/7, and yet it's called tamid because it happens consistently every single day. So now that we know that Amor Lahem is an instruction specifically put in the infinitive to indicate that it's a regular, consistent instruction to bless the Jewish people, now we have another question. Aleph, number one, if you consider it, the Torah does not allocate a time when you're supposed to say Birkas Kohanim. So if that's the case, What do the words Amor Lahem add to the story when you already have the instruction to bless the Jewish people? If Amor Lahem is not going to tie it down to a specific time and is only going to indicate that it's ongoing, who needs it? And don't think that, oh, well, maybe if you just saw the words Koisa Baruch Hu, you might mistakenly translate it as Shebirkas Koyanim in Inyan Shul Reshus, that it's up to you. If you want to bless the Jewish people, this is how you do it. That should you now opt to bless the Jewish people, this is what you should say. Therefore, the Torah has to quickly say, no, you must say it. You have to say it. Because if that really was our concern, that a person might misinterpret and think that Birkas Kohanim is voluntary, well, then the Torah should have said it the other way around. It should have first started off, Omer, say the following words, or bless the Jewish people, and then say, using these words. So why do we need Amor Lahem? If we already know Kosev Baruch Hu, keep blessing the Jewish people always. Beis Yisayim Mizoi, furthermore, Amor Lahem doesn't just say saying to them. That's not only an extra word, which apparently doesn't have to be there, because Amor would have done the job. Lahem actually seems to contradict the message of the bracha. Because nusach habracha kulahu b'lashon yachid. The whole bracha is in the singular. Yivarechecha, v'yishmerecha, yor elecha, v'chonecha, yisay lecha, v'yasem lecha. All of those are in the singular. V'amor lahem hu b'lashon rabbi. And lahem is now in the plural. So not only is it an extra word, it seems like a misfit word. Rashi, so therefore that forced Rashi to explain that the Torah is obviously showing us not only is there an instruction to the kohanim Amor Lahem in Lashon Tzivoy, even though it's Lashon Mokar, but beyond the instruction to the kohanim, there's also a message that is relevant to the listeners, which Rashi interprets to mean they must all hear the words of the bracha. What's he saying? Yes, it is correct that Birkas Kohanim must be stated in the singular. Kohanim, which means that the Kohanim that the Kohanim cannot stand up over there and say, we're giving a blanket bracha to everybody. Their intention has to be to bless every individual as an individual. Yet on the other hand, the Kohanim have to say the bracha in such a way that everybody assembled can hear the bracha. So you got all these individuals, including each individual who's receiving the brachas, and yet they all have to hear the bracha as one. So now Amor Lahem is telling us what? Not just that it should be loud enough, that the message of the kohanim, although directed to each individual, has to be heard by everybody. Now that would make you think the kohanim are going to be completely tumult, and so therefore Rashi has to explain it. Because of Lo Yisavorchem B'chipazon U'Bebeholos, he says, Amor Mole teaches us, don't rush it and don't be chaotic about it. Think of the demands that we're placing on the kohanim now. They have to intend that their bracha is focused on each individual as an individual. And at the same time, they have to have in mind the entire community. Lohem. He might feel like he has to rush, because now he's saying, you and you and you and you. Got to go through this quickly. I got to think of this person, got to think of that person. So there's pressure, there's kind of time pressure. Ve'al kulam, and I've got to be thinking about everybody. Ubeholos, lashon bahulu valul, and with confusion. Literally, the kohen could get a little bit confused, a little bit distracted about all the things to hold in his head at the same time, the individuals, the community. Rashi says that's why the Torah put an avav into the word amor, a full word, because it's necessary to make a special mention over here, that it should be clear, it should be intentional, it should be heartfelt. That there should be a clear intention for each individual and a clear intention for the whole community. And all of that without getting all, phased, but with a full heart. Pirush, to put it clearly, the Kohen might well think, he has this whole community to bless. So he might think, I'll give a little bit of emotion to this one, a little bit of intention to that one. Therefore, the Kohen is given this incredible responsibility to bless everybody as an individual with his full heart. That's a huge thing for a Kohen. Each individual with his full heart. Now we can see the element of Chassidus embedded within Rashi. What were the two examples that Rashi brought to show us that the construction of the word amor works? Zocher and Shomer. Those are not just to explain the words. Zocher and Shomer actually play the role of an introduction to the Birkas Kohanim. How so? They have the same theme. When it comes to the word Yivarecha, Rashi explains it means she's boruchu nechasecha, that your asset should be blessed to grow and increase. Val yishmerecha, and then following that it says that Hashem should guard you. Because of Rashi says that you shouldn't have, God forbid, robbers who come take your assets. And he gives a whole explanation that when humans give you something, they can't ensure that it won't be taken, etc. If a person gives a gift and it gets stolen, the recipient has no benefit from the gift. But says Rashi, Hashem is not that way. He's the one who gives us the gifts, and he's the one that protects those gifts for us, that they don't get taken from us. Why does Rashi have to get in so much detail? If robbers come along and they take the gift away from him, what benefit, pleasure, enjoyment has he had from this gift? What's Rashi telling us that we don't already know? It's self-understood. If a person loses what was given to them, it's painful. Rashi is not just telling us about human psychology. Rashi is explaining these are not two distinct brachas, the bracha of giving and the bracha of sustaining or guarding. And the bracha achasi, it's a single bracha. The bracha is, she is baruchu nechasecha, that your assets should be blessed be'oifen shakadosh baruch hu shomer ala nechasim, in such a way that Hashem guards those assets. Because without Hashem's security, what would the value be in the bracha? The whole Yivarecha would have been a waste of time. Likewise, that Hashem should, so to speak, show his countenance to us, as they translate it, and give us peace. Again, it's not two separate things. It's a single bracha that has both a positive element and an element that we have to ensure that we can preclude and exclude. When can a person have peace, the positive? When Hashem diminishes or subdues his so-called potential for anger against a person. So there are twin brachas going on over here. The giving and the protecting, the peace and the lack of criticism. And Rashi is plugging that same message into Amoilahim. Sheha brocha is telling us what kind of a brocha do the kohanim have to give the Jewish people. He kamoy zocher shomer, the kind of brocha that has this twin value like zocher and shomer. Zachar v'Shamar the Shabbos ein beis pratim nifrodim. Zachar and Shamar are not two separate elements. They're one theme. To the point that they were actually said simultaneously. When can you remember and sanctify Shabbos properly? Only when you guard all of those requirements of what we have to desist from on Shabbos. And Rashi wants us to know that Amoy Lahem is the same thing. Kol bracha shakahanim mevarchim Yisrael, every bracha that the kohanim give us, klula mechiyuv o mishmira, which is shlila, has something that Hashem's giving us and something that Hashem's protecting that shouldn't harm us. Shemin yechad kanal, and they're twinned. They're one concept, two faces of one coin. Like we said before, the bracha of giving us assets is that He can protect those assets. The one who gives is the one who guards. And only that will make it a full and complete bracha. Rashi, following from that, Rashi explains that not only must the bracha be said, but it must be heard. In order to prepare for this kind of bracha. What kind of bracha? Bracha achas aklolu mechiv mishmira shlila. A singular bracha that both has an element of what it contributes and an element of what it contains and protects. It's of Bnei Yisrael that can only happen when the Jews, and the kohanim blessing those Jews, also have to have both elements. There has to be something which is given, something positive, proactive. A single tense bracha for each individual, single form bracha for each individual. Which has to be relevant to what the kohanim say. That each kohen has to listen. Each Jew has to listen. Yet on the other hand, everybody together has to listen to the bracha, meaning no person can be so self-absorbed to think the bracha is only for them. They have to hear that this is a bracha for all of us. And that is achieved through putting ourselves aside. Shabbos, you put certain activities aside. At Birkas Kohanim, we have to put our ego aside to be able to receive the bracha as part of the collective. Vazai, when you have that healthy balance of both the giving in the proactive personal way and the protection in the broader way, then when we're all with that sense of unity, that we're sharing this experience together, that opens the channel that Hashem should bless us. Till you get to the, so to speak, overarching bracha of all the Yosim Lecha Shalom, that Hashem should give us peace, which, as the Gemara tells us, Shashakal Keneged Akol, peace is worth everything. Until we get to the ultimate peace at the time of Mashiach, Shalom Shmoi, whose name indicates what he brings to this world, peace. To the point that the entire world is united, not only us. And the entire world blesses Hashem, not only the Kohanim blessing us. Because then we'll reach a point where the world is filled with knowledge of Hashem like the ocean is filled with water. It should happen takef umiyad mamash.